people paid attention when I played it, and that I could feel. I think that was what I was responding to, was just, oh, well, people seem to sort of listen to that. I think I should do more of that, because I seem to be making a connection. It's really ultimately all about, are you connecting?
Awesome. Well, I'm Adam. I appreciate you doing this. And this is a podcast about you and your journey in this music industry. And we'll talk about the show, the live album you put out.
Great. That
Cool.
sounds good.
Awesome. So first off, talk to me. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Bronxville, New York, only because the hospital was there, but I was raised in Pelham, New York, which is just a suburb.
Is it
Just
close?
right,
I'm so bad with.
right outside of New York City.
Okay.
It was a little sleepy little suburb, but it was definitely a bedroom, suburb of New York, because my dad was in the TV news industry, so he needed to be close to New York. And
Yeah, I saw that he's pretty. I mean, he was a famous journalist. It's incredible.
yeah. Um, and I never know how to totally answer that question, because I moved to Colorado when I was just turning 13. And I feel like the second half of my childhood really was in Boulder, Colorado. So I'm sort of half and half.
Mm-hmm.
Two very different places.
Oh, I would imagine. But being in New York up until what, you're probably going into high school or close to that at that point, right?
Junior high, yeah.
Yeah. So you were living there up until then, but were you into music? I think I read that you started writing songs at like 5 or something crazy early.
Well, I mean, I was doing everything at 5. I wrote a school play. I was writing poems. I was just sort of experimenting with every form of, written communication, and as well as other things in the arts. I was just always fascinated with the arts, I guess. So yeah, I was doing music. My parents sent me to a camp a day camp when I was, I think, 7. And it was, I call it nerd camp, because they did like all the stuff except for the athletics,
Oh,
like
sure.
it was like arts and, all kinds of stuff that I was interested in. And at that camp, I learned how to play guitar. So that kind of sent me on this path of, and it was during the great folk music, movement of the late 60s, and I had an older sister who was really into Bob Dylan, and so playing the guitar was just like the coolest thing you could do. And I actually taught my older sister how to play after I came home from camp, and knew a few chords. So I was latched on to music really early, but it wasn't totally obvious to me anyway that was going to be my thing, because I was into a lot of other kinds of things, like writing and dancing and painting, and a lot of just anything artistic.
Yeah, it sounds like that was a big. But to learn guitar at 7 at this day camp, that's pretty cool.
I always say, I learned at 7, and I reached kind of my proficiency level at about 15, and I've pretty much stayed there for the rest of the time. But I always viewed the guitar as just like a vehicle for songs,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to become competent and be able to accompany myself, but I never had any desire to be a great guitar player. I just wanted to be, competent and be able to deliver a song. That was the main thing to me.
Yeah, I've spoke to a lot of songwriters that have that similar idea. It's where it's like, I never aspired to be like this shredding guitar player.
Right.
I just used it as a vehicle to express what I was, writing, and try to get the basis of the song out, instead of
Right.
learning how to rip some solo, or, figure out that
Oh,
side of the guitar.
the scariest thing somebody could say to me is, take it. you know, Play a solo. No, that's not me.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I mean, it's just, I think all the things that I learned in terms of like performing music, singing too, was the same thing. I really wanted to sing because I wanted to deliver a song, but it was always centered around a song.
Hmm.
All of them, everything that I learned, even later in later years, learning things about producing records, all of that, serve the song. It's really what it all always boils down to for me.
Were you like, I mean, at 7, when you learn how to play the guitar, and it sounds like you're always kind of involved in writing at some capacity, writing plays at 5. I mean, I have a 6-year-old. I can imagine him being like, "Here's this play that I wrote." Um,
It
but
wasn't it wasn't an amazing play, I have to say. It was pretty simplistic, but
but still, I mean, to be able to do these things and already kind of expressing yourself in that way, did you start putting songs together fairly quickly, or did you already have kind of ideas and melodies in your head that you were able to get out now that you have this guitar and can kind of hear the notes?
You know, it it's funny. I really didn't. I was writing poetry and all kinds of other things concurrently with learning the guitar and learning music, but I don't know why. I'm really glad it worked out this way, retrospectively, but I was so focused on learning other people's songs, learning how to play like every Bob Dylan song I could
Hmm.
find, and every I was obviously, my early influence was folk music, so every folk song that I could find, um, that I didn't almost put two and two together that I could write those songs. And I think it's actually a great thing that it worked out that way, because what happened is I learned the DNA of songs. I learned through kind of osmosis, what a verse is, what a chorus is, how a song is put together, how a great song is put together. And I learned that by learning everyone else's songs,
Hmm.
even to the point of, I really think, writing out the lyrics, because back in the day we didn't have, computers or printers or online, we couldn't go online and find out the lyrics. So like lifting the needle up on the record player and writing the lyrics down to transcribe them so that I could have a sheet of paper with and sing it,
Hmm.
even that exercise made me learn how a song was put together. So it wasn't until I was much older, like in my teens, that I thought, oh, wait a minute, I could try writing these things too, because I was very, I wrote a lot. I wrote short stories and poetry and all sorts of things.
Hmm.
But it took me a long time to put those two things together, and I think in the end it was a good thing, because I learned so much about how songs are built, you
Hmm.
know.
With that, like, having your father in journalism and writing, and was that something that you would show to him and say, "Hey, what do you think of this?" Or is it just because, or is it two totally different worlds of
It
writing?
it felt like totally different worlds. I mean, for one thing, he was not a huge fan of any music that was made after, say, 1950.
Oh,
Um,
interesting. Okay.
so, he wasn't a big Bob Dylan fan, I'll say that. So it was kind of, although, my parents' music that was playing in the background at cocktail parties and just around the house definitely seeped into my consciousness. The
Hmm.
older, Ella Fitzgerald and Django Reinhardt and things like that. But um, he did. We are very we were he has passed on, so,
Hmm.
but we are very different kinds of writers. I think in terms of the influence that I got from him, probably the biggest thing was just watching his discipline, just
Mm.
his. He would go into he worked from home a lot of the time, and he would go into his office, and I would hear the typewriter going from 8 o'clock in the morning until he'd take a little break for lunch and go back, and all day long the typewriter going, and I knew that's what it took to be a writer. And I think if there's any one thing that I really got from him, it was the sense that it's actually a job. It's not some sort of pie in the sky kind of, oh, wouldn't it be cool to be a writer? It was a lot of
Right.
work, a lot of
Yeah,
work.
and I feel like that's become kind of like this. It's always been kind of a jaded thing from the outside. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like, especially now with like social media and TikTok and all these things happening, or I have a 14-year-old son that is now realizing the amount of work it takes to really have these channels and these things do something. I mean, it's not just like one day you decide, oh, I'm going to be a YouTube star and I'm going to put a
Right.
video up and then everyone's going to come to my channel and it's going to be, life is good. And 90% of the day I'm just hanging out, spending money, and then I take an hour to shoot this video. You know what I mean? It's there's so much is happening all behind the scenes, but it's the you know, the behind the curtain that nobody really sees. They just see the song, or they just see the video, or they just see this. And that's really cool that you're able to kind of see that firsthand.
Yeah, and I think the lesson in there for me was that he did have career peaks. He won Emmys and
Hmm.
other awards, and but he did what he did because it really it was who he was. I mean,
Hmm.
he did it was its own reward, and I think that that's really a recipe for contentment and happiness in a career. If you're doing it for accolades, you may or may not get them.
Yeah.
But if you're doing it for that reason, you're always wanting that. Whereas the rewards come, if you're doing it because you love it, the rewards come naturally just from doing it. Whether or
Mhm.
not, it's always lovely when somebody pays attention and says, hey, good work, but the, boy, as a motivation, that's a pretty flimsy one.
Sure. And I'm just speaking to just the generations I'm seeing, and stuff that's kind of happening within what's going on now, as far as with when I was growing up, selling out was the worst thing you could do.
Right.
If you're in a band and you sold like Green Day selling out to a major label was like, still remember that being like such a big deal. Like, oh my
Yes.
gosh, they signed to a major label. And it's like, well, yeah, they did. But they did the work to get there. But nowadays it's like, all I want is this video just to go nuts. It's like it's such an opposite
It's funny.
mindset.
We have come full circle for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of came from that mentality too, and it's kind of crazy that we hold artists to this completely different standard than, say, a doctor or
Right.
I mean, somebody who does something else. It's a little. I mean, we want our artists to be absolutely pure, and they're, of course, they're not, because they're people.
Mhm.
They're humans.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. So you end up moving to Boulder. You said at 13. Was that a difficult move going
It
from
was.
New York?
Yeah, it was. I was not a happy kid. My parents had gotten divorced, and ultimately it was the best thing that could have happened. My mother, all the other kids, I'm the youngest, so all the other kids were gone, married, or in college or whatever. And my mother and I moved to Boulder. I think she needed to get out of the New York suburbs, because being a divorced woman in 1970 in the suburbs of New York was not great.
Hmm. Is she from New York or no?
Both my parents were from the Chicago area originally,
Oh,
but
okay.
had lived in New York for quite a long time. And she also, I think, wanted to find a place where I could go to college, where she could live less expensively,
Yeah,
all of those things.
sure.
And you would think on paper I would have loved it, but I hated, any kid in eighth grade is not going to be happy to be leaving their friends and
Of
leaving
course.
the
Yeah.
place that they know. So I was not a happy kid for a couple of years. Ultimately, it was such a great place for me musically, because there was a whole music scene that was really lively and inspiring, and I could go out, and my mom, God bless her, took me out to see bands when I was 15, 16 years old. Any band I wanted to see, she'd take
That's
me.
cool.
She took me to a bar on Christmas Eve, which I think a lot of people would say is bad parenting, but for me it was like, that was what I wanted. I wanted to see these bands play. But there were a couple of years when I first moved there when I just was really unhappy, and even dropped out of school for a little while. And I am not exaggerating, I think, to say that music saved me during those couple of years. And that was probably when I did the most kind of woodshedding and really digging into guitar, and it just saved my life. I spent hours with that guitar in my room, and I think if that whole 10,000 hour theory is true, a lot of those hours were between the ages of like 13 and 15 for
Hmm.
me.
Hmm. And so you were writing out songs at that point, like, just
I
kind
was
of
still
getting.
I was still writing poetry
Oh.
and things. I wasn't writing songs, but I was, diving into all kinds of, Joni Mitchell at that point, Joni Mitchell and Leonard Cohen and
Hmm.
Jackson Brown and Paul Simon, and learning all these songs, learning more chords, just learning how to use music as a really, when I look back on it, as a cathartic device, I guess.
Hmm.
I mean, it was my way of channeling all my misery. I mean, at best, a 14-year-old is a pretty miserable, you know, person.
Right.
But
I have a 14-year-old.
at,
Tell me about it.
there's a lot of drama going on
Oh yeah.
on a good day, and for me,
A
that
lot of
was
hormones.
yeah, and for me that was a really tumultuous time. So I was pouring my heart into my guitar, basically. But I wasn't writing. I was writing a lot of poetry and a lot of other things, but not songs yet. It was still a couple of years later that I had this sort of epiphany that, oh, I don't know why it didn't occur to me, but I always say that I think one of the reasons is, some of the earliest music I heard in my life was the Beatles. And the
Hmm.
Beatles songs seemed so elemental to me that they must have always been there. They were like, nobody wrote those. They were
Right.
just around.
Sure. It's
And
like
I
a happy
don't,
birthday.
yeah, exactly. And I don't think it really dawned on me that there were two guys like working really hard, hashing it out, figuring out, you know, how to make those songs into what they are, in a room somewhere for a long, long time. And still at 14, 15, I was I was interested in other people's songs
Hmm.
and singing them and playing them.
You said you had like an epiphany at one point. Like, do you remember that kind of click happening and being like, "Whoa, okay."
I think it was one of these bands that I went to see in Boulder, that I followed around, whenever they played, and they started. It was a hard thing to do if you were playing in bars back then, to slip in an original song, because most people didn't want to hear that.
Sure. Yeah, you're just there as the cover.
You're a
Yeah, entertainment.
breathing jukebox,
Sure.
basically.
Breathing. I like that.
But but I think it was when I saw one of these bands and they started slipping in their own songs into their set list that it dawned on me, oh, that's a thing I could do, because the two things I love the most are music and writing, and
Hmm.
maybe I could put them together. And so that's when I really kind of started dabbling in songwriting. And my first attempts were really just imitation. I
Hmm.
mean, that's the way you learn, I think. They weren't great, but I was sort of just imitating what I loved, and trying to copy, in a way, copy what I loved.
Hmm.
But at some point, I started to realize, oh, this is harder than this is harder than it looks, and you really have to dig in. And I remember really clearly writing my first, what I would consider, mature song when I was 19 years old. I had come home from seeing Dolly Parton for the first time in Denver. She was doing her big crossover tour. She had put a record out, and she was playing little rock clubs instead of
Hmm.
playing the usual country circuit.
Sure.
And I went all by myself because I couldn't find anybody to go with me, because country music was not cool in Boulder, Colorado
Oh,
in
is that
19
right?
not cool. Country rock was cool, but
Not,
real
yeah.
country music was. So I went by myself, and her performance, and it tore me open. It was so real, and her songs were so honest. And I remember the feeling I had driving home, just like, oh my God, that's how you do it. And I went home that night and wrote what I would consider my first real song
Hmm.
at 19.
Oh, wow. And was that something that, do you still remember the song at all?
I do. I mean, I'm not going to play it for
Right, but I
anybody,
was just
but
curious.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it's got some depth. I mean,
Uh-huh.
it's not bad. It's very young,
Hmm.
sounding, but but it's real. And I think the thing is, it really came from a deeper place inside of me than all the things that I'd been sort of trying to write, which just were imitations of other people's work.
Yeah.
And I think I got a major piece of the puzzle that night, which was you have to really dig down inside of yourself and bring out whatever it is that you've got in there, in order to write something original. I mean, that's what it takes.
And then having that song, once you get home and having that moment, it must have been kind of like a validating thing where you finish and you're like, wow, this is actually something, good. Like, I don't know, were you like, this is good, like I really want to continue this? Was that the moment that you thought where, I could probably pursue this? Or was it still just something like, that was cool that I did that, hopefully I'll do it again?
Yeah, I've never been good at knowing anything in terms of, this is good, or I did this well. I mean, I just have never been good at that. It took external things to happening to, reinforcing me to say, oh, somebody responded to that. That must mean that I've hit a nerve, yeah, I've just never, I mean, to this day, I could write a song, and the most I have about it, even what I would consider the best songs I've written, the most I've ever had is an inkling that maybe they were okay, So I'm not that person who goes, I just wrote a hit, not me.
Sure.
But I got feedback for this song. I got feedback when I would go out and play it, because at that point I was playing in little bars around town, and people paid attention when I played it, and that I could feel. So I think that was what I was responding to, was just, oh, well, people seem to sort of listen to that. I think I should do more of that, because I seem to be making a connection. It's really ultimately all about, are you connecting? Are you connecting with people? And you can definitely tell that instantly when you're playing live. It's either happening or it's not.
Right. Are people going back to the bar or the bathroom or out to smoke a cigarette, or are they in tune with what you're doing?
And in a bar, it's super, if you can connect with people and make them shut up in a bar, you're really doing something.
Sure.
I'm so glad I had that 10 years of training playing in the bars, because it both, gives you a nice hard suit of armor, psychically in a way, because you see everything and you put up with everything, but it also makes you it gives you a great training in how to pace a set and what people will, how to command, how to walk on a stage and have people stop what they're doing. I mean, all of that, there's a certain amount of, I always think of it like captaining a ship, right? If somebody's got to be the captain, and if people sense that there is no captain, somebody's going to step up. And
right.
And it better be you. If you're on the stage, you better be the one who's saying, okay, this is how it's going to go. And you can do that in the most benevolent way, in the most charming and benevolent way, but you have to be in control of what's going on. So, and those 10 years playing in bars was very educational for me that way.
Were you going to college at 19?
That's my lab. He thinks somebody's coming in to kill me.
Oh, okay. All good. The beauty of, like I said, there's something cool about that I think is kind of cool that came from this pandemic. I mean, as terrible as the pandemic is, but like, you're sitting in your house, and I just think that's rad that we can talk this way. It is. Again, back to the behind the curtain look. So were you said you're when you moved to Colorado, your mom was thinking, okay, change of pace, financially a little bit easier than New York, and you'd be able to go to college there. Did you attend college, or was it something that you were into music and you didn't care?
I'm a dropout. I went to college. I went to CU Boulder for, I don't know, probably Probably a year and a half. It was like it was 20 years, and I was still having those. Oh, I forgot to take my final exam dreams. I mean, because I just sort of dropped out. But what happened was I was at the same time playing in bars at night, and that was a heck of a lot more fun and really what I was interested in. And I tried to channel my music, inclinations into I switched my majors to be a music major, and of course, they had no idea what to do with me. I mean, I wasn't an opera singer, clearly, so
Hmm.
you know um, music school wasn't a great fit. I got some great education out of it while I was there, but it just wasn't a great fit. I knew what I wanted to do, and I told my parents that I would give it a year, and if I didn't make it, which just cracks me up when I think about that, in a year I would go back to school. And I remember my father saying to me, "You're not going back. That's not happening." I mean,
Oh, you said, okay, you here, let me drop out for this year. I'm
yeah.
gonna give it all go into the music thing, and then if it comes around next year and I haven't landed, was there like a target that you had to get to, or it was just kind of a generic? If I haven't made it, I'm
I'm
gonna, yeah,
I'm not even sure if I knew what making it even meant.
right.
But I just I knew that there were things out. I don't think I even knew for instance, what a publishing deal was. I think I knew, a record deal. Maybe that's what I was thinking. I'm
Hmm.
not sure. I look back on that 19-year-old person, and I think, who was that? I don't even know. But I think I just had a sort of generic idea of making it.
Hmm.
And although I listened to, not that long ago, I was sort of archiving some things, and I listened to, like, well, I think it may have been the very first radio interview I ever did.
Oh, that's cool.
And I was really struck by one thing, and that was the interviewer asked me what my goals were, what I wanted to be or achieve in the music industry, and I said, I just want to make a living as a musician. And I thought that was kind of great
Hmm.
for a 19, 20-year old to, I mean, I think it wasn't that I was keeping my expectations low, it was that I saw that as the bar for, being a professional was really important to me. Like, if somebody would pay me to do this, that must mean I've at least I'm at a certain level of proficiency, and that was my answer to him. So apparently I had that in my mind, even then, was just, I just want to be a musician who's a professional.
Hmm. Yeah, it wasn't, "Hey, I want to have $1 million record deal and I want to tour." It's just, I want to do this for a living as long as I can pay my bills and eat and live life.
I
That's
mean,
all I care about.
I really think I would have been happy if I could have gone on the road with somebody as a backup singer,
Uh-huh.
um, at least for a while. It was about being a part of it. It
Hmm.
was just about being a part of all of it, because it seemed like this magical world to me. And
Hmm.
it still does. I mean, there's just this aspect. I've written so many songs about carnivals and circuses and stuff throughout my writing career, and it's because we are circus people, really. That's what we are. We are like a tribe. Other people are the people on the that aren't in the music business, or aren't in performers, really, is more
Hmm.
specifically, um, don't know what this life is like, and there's just something very circus like about it, both in the bad ways and the good ways. And I think I knew that, and I sensed that, and I really, really wanted to be a part of that.
I like that. I feel like I can relate to you a lot on that front, because I just, all I cared about ever was just being involved in the music industry in some capacity, and having, even if I could afford like a studio apartment and food, and like gas for my car, that's all I cared about. And I wasn't a songwriter, but I love music so much that I went through like the radio. I did radio for 17 years, and I took any job and every job just to be there and,
Yeah.
have some sort of and then, climb up the ladder. But like, it was just to be there and be around it was something that I thought was so cool.
I think those of us that felt that way are the ones that have stuck with it, because you have to. I mean, years ago when someone asked me, when I had been in Nashville and I'd had my first, sort of success, someone asked me, what would you say to aspiring songwriters? And
That's my last question. Sorry.
Well, my answer may
I'm
have
sure.
changed.
Yeah, I was gonna say hopefully it'll change.
My answer, well, I probably have a longer answer now, but
I
back
love it.
then I remember saying, if you can possibly talk yourself out of it, then it's not for you.
Mm.
If you can't talk yourself out of it, then at least you're going to love the climb,
Right.
wherever it takes you. But and I still think, any career that's more than, a 9-to-5 job, you kind of have to have that attitude. Like, I want to do this no matter what.
Right. It's like fight or flight for it. You're either gonna, as somebody told me, in one of these interviews, I asked the same, that question, and they said, if you have a backup, they said, if you have something to fall back on, you will,
You
which
will.
I thought that was so powerful. It's like, yeah, if you know that there's a net, then you maybe won't put all of it into it, because even if it doesn't work out, at least I've got this behind me.
Yeah,
But
and you think about this, I think about what I did. I had a 2-year-old child, packed up a U-Haul, moved to Nashville, lived on a credit card for a while on the promise of a publishing deal, which I ended up getting. But who knows what could have happened? I mean, it was all kind of. I'm sure that my family was going, does she know what she's doing?
right.
It's
But that's it, it's just having the drive in the it's almost like a delusional thought, but not, if that makes sense.
it's delusional until you make it come true.
Right, right.
Then it's not a delusion.
It's like, if you think about, yeah, if you think about thinking, telling yourself, and I think it's interesting because a lot of artists that have made it, or you've bigger, the biggest artists in the world, you'll hear them say, like, if my kid wanted to do this, I'd tell them not. Like, they shouldn't or wouldn't. Like, I don't want them to pursue this just because they know how hard it is to get there.
Yeah, but that's a dicey business, telling your kid what to do and what
That
not
is
to
for
do.
sure. I mean, I would never say that to my kids, but I've just heard people say that, like, hey, I'm not really stoked that my son wants to be an actor and I'm
Yeah,
you know what I mean, or whatever it may
yeah,
be.
yeah.
But so you ended up moving to Nashville, obviously. So when did that take place? Like, how long were you in Boulder? And then you get to Nashville. There, you set up. You had promise of a publishing deal. Like, what happened to get you to that? Like, what was the next step before you decided to move to Nashville?
I had made, I think, 2 trips to Nashville, just sort of exploratory. Go pound the pavement, knock on doors, try to get meetings with publishers, producers, record labels, anybody. I had a friend who was a former duet partner of mine that we used to play bars in Boulder, and he had moved to Nashville and had a hit, written a hit. He let me come and sleep on his couch for a week, and I did that a couple times, and set up a couple of meetings here and there, and I just had enough encouragement. My husband at the time was also sort of, sending the time it was cassette tapes.
Mm-hmm.
He was, sending the cassette tapes out, and we got enough encouragement that it seemed like. And I did have one publisher who ended up being my publisher, my first publisher. He did say, "Look, you really kind of have to be here. Are you willing to move?" And I said yes. And he said, "I'll tell you what, if you move here, I'll give you a publishing deal."
Oh,
And
wow.
true to his word, he did. I was here. I got here to Nashville in late 1987, and I think on January 1st, 1988, I had a publishing deal. And
Wow.
that's kind of amazing. I mean, I didn't know at the time that it can take a lot longer than that, but I had made those preliminary trips, and I was ready. I was really ready to dive in. And of course, the first time I got an actual check, they give you an advance, not very much of an advance, but they gave me an advance monthly to write songs. And the first time I got that check, I thought, oh my God, I really have to do this. I better do this. I better do, this
Because
is
if you
real.
don't, right, then you have to pay them back. Is it
I
kind of
mean,
like
well, no, it wasn't even, you don't, I mean, they're betting on you essentially. You don't
sure?
really, but it's just that it was so real all of a sudden. It was so,
Hmm.
wow, somebody's believes in me enough to pay me to write songs. I got to knuckle down.
Yeah, now I have to deliver.
And I think also coming here, I always say it was like grad school. It was like the really sort of fine points of songwriting weren't really apparent to me until I was here and I was soaking it up. And I would go to the Bluebird Cafe and I would hear Don Schlitz sing this song, The Gambler, which I had heard 8 million times on the radio, and realized that I had never really listened to it until I heard Don sing it. And then I heard every single word, every single turn of phrase, every rhyme. I mean, there's just something about, like, I was looking at everything with a magnifying glass once I got here, because everybody is so focused on songs.
Hmm.
And so it was an incredible education. And those first couple of years, I was just soaking up, all of that, and listening to songwriters sing their songs was a real eye opener for me.
Yeah,
It made me listen in a different way.
I was curious about that. So you move in. I'm not. I've heard a lot of. I kind of know what a publishing deal is in a sense, but I would love to hear like from you. So you get to Nashville, you get a publishing deal. Does that mean they're not signing you on as an artist? So
No.
they're not signing you on as Gretchen Peters, the artist who we're going to help put a record out. We think what you are writing is good, and we
Yes.
want you to go write with other people and pitch other songs. Like, I guess, can you break that down for me a little bit, just so I
Yes.
understand?
It is definitely about the songs. It is a publishing deal is an act of faith on their part, saying, we believe that you're going to write some great songs that will be able to get cut by artists.
Other artists.
And um, now when I got here, and I knocked on all those doors, about half of the people told me you should probably focus on getting a publishing deal. And the other half said you should probably focus on getting a record deal and, don't, that's not worry about the songwriting. So I had this very mixed message kind of
Right. And
thing
how do you
coming
make
back at
that
me.
decision? Like, are you like, at that point, it's kind of like, do I want to pursue a career as being the artist and being the face and focal point, or do I want to be more, because you're almost like, if you're the songwriter, you're almost kind of more behind the scenes. If you're writing a song and then handing it to, whoever, then they're going to now be the brand or
The face of
the
the song.
face of the song,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and the thing for me was that I had grown up on these singer-songwriters, like I mentioned, Joni
Hmm.
Mitchell, Paul Simon, Leonard Cohen. In my mind, I was like, well, what's the difference?
Right.
They write, they perform, they make records, and I wanted to do all of that. I didn't even separate any of that in my mind. This whole idea that I would write songs for somebody was completely new to me. And actually, once I started trying to do that, I wasn't any good at it. I wasn't, I remember at the time, like the Judds were really happening, brand
Hmm.
new, and really, and I remember thinking, I could write a song for the Judds. And I remember and what I did was write these songs that sounded like the Judds, but they weren't coming from that place. They weren't. I mean, they were just unremarkable and nobody cared. And then every once in a while, I would write something that really came from inside of me, and that would be the one that my publisher would sort of perk up and say, "Do more of that," you
Mhm.
know. And I
Like being
started,
yourself, like in writing for you, just whatever you would want to put out instead
yeah.
of like targeting
And I
a
started
specific
realizing
artist.
that that was what they meant by finding your voice as a writer, but also it kind of lined up with my own ambitions to make my own records. It just seemed that I did better. I had more success in every sense of the word, just following my own nose as an artist. And those songs that I wrote that really came from that place inside of me, those ended up being recorded by other artists, much to my
Hmm.
surprise. I mean, I kept, I remember many times thinking, I can't believe anybody else identified with that song, wanted to sing it, but those were the ones. So I slowly, over a few years, started to realize that whatever talent I had lay in being myself. Not, I was not somebody who was going to be able to sit in a room and co-writing. I was terrible at co-writing. I'm a hopeless bad co-writer. I'm very slow
Although
and
you've written some
I'm
co-wrote some huge songs.
I have a couple of co-writing relationships which I treasure, but anybody that's co-written with me will tell you that, oh yeah, well, she sits in the room and stares a lot and not a lot happens, and I'm just very slow. And it's like, there's with co-writing, there's this expectation that you're going to get a song like at the end of the day, at the end of the
Hmm.
session. It's like, that's not me. But so I just sort of over time I began to realize, um, whatever talents I have lie in mining that vein that is inside of me, and for some reason other artists respond to those songs too, and they want to
Hmm.
record them, and they're definitely the songs that I would want to record should I get a record deal. And when I did, of course, I made a whole album of those songs.
Right.
And but that just, it wasn't without a lot of help and guidance and mentorship from my first publisher, who was wonderful, who did say, you know what, stop trying to, you know, write things that sound like what you're hearing down the street. Just do what you do, because that's what I'm really interested in. And
Hmm.
that was so invaluable to me.
Hmm. For sure. I mean, do you remember having the first, like, or what the first kind of big, like, I made kind of big cut that you got, or a big song that was like, wow, like this changed it all, or this really got the ball going for me?
There were two. The
Okay.
first one I co-wrote with my then husband, and I give him credit because it was really his idea, but it was one of the first cuts that I ever had, and it was a number one song. It was a song called "The Chill of an Early Fall" by George
Hmm.
Strait. Um, and while that definitely raised my profile around Nashville, and it was great. It was exciting to have a number one song. It wasn't it wasn't a song that I'd written by myself, and it wasn't until songs like "Let That Pony Run"
Hmm.
and "Independence Day" came out that I felt like I had I had written these songs that you could sort of tell were mine,
Right.
I guess. And that was a turning point. That was a point when other artists, especially female artists, for the most part, started coming to me for, do you have I'm making a record, do you have any songs?
Oh,
That's
wow.
that was a big turning point. And
Hmm.
we were so lucky. I say we because there were a number of my contemporaries in the 90s who were the beneficiaries of some of the greatest female artists in country music. Trisha Yearwood and Faith Hill and Martina McBride and Pam Tillis and Patty
Night
Loveless.
Twain. Yeah.
And Matresa Berg and I were especially, she's a dear friend of mine, and we were especially, I guess we were competitors back then, but we're best friends. So,
Oh, that's cool.
but we were we talk about it all the time, how lucky we were that we had these incredible voices that were vehicles for our songs,
Mm-hmm.
or our songs were vehicles for those voices. I don't know, whichever way you want to look at it, but we were very, very lucky to be in the right place at the right time with those songs.
Yeah, I was gonna say not only that, but to have the skill set and have the songs
Yeah.
that really that worked. I mean, and then to have the awards that you've won, and the Grammy nominations to the, you're in the country rock and roll or the country music hall of fame, aren't you? I mean, like that's,
The Nashville Songwriters
or
Hall
it's
of Fame,
not national. So sorry,
which I'm very, very proud of
but that's
because,
still, I mean, wow.
yeah, yeah, it was a otherworldly experience. I
That's
still pinch myself at that because all my heroes are in there. Mickey Newbury, Bob Dylan, Johnny Cash.
Yeah, the greats
Harlan
of the
Howard.
greats.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's, and to be a part of that and to be a name amongst those names, it has to be just such a great feeling.
it's an amazing feeling, and I remember the night I was inducted into the Hall of Fame. I said in my acceptance speech that it's really hard to believe that you can sit on your bed in your bedroom with a guitar and just hold the guitar and make something up
Mm-hmm.
and end up there. I mean, how does that even happen? Because you're so alone. I mean, for me, I'm so alone by choice, when I write a song. I'm typically I'm by myself, and it's a very solitary profession. And then it's like that night I was like, it's like somebody opened a door and I walked out into a room with thousands of people in it, and they were all saying, "Yeah, you're one of us. Here, here, you're in the Hall of Fame." And it was just like, how did that happen? It's a crazy, magical world. That
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's beautifully put. Where you're in your room, you write a song, just you or you on a guitar, whatever it is, and the amount of people that song affects, not even knowing, just something that you came up with sitting there, and then yeah, in that process, like when you're done writing, and it's not like you can fast forward and see all these people are gonna love this. This is gonna be such a big song, and
Oh
then
no.
I'm gonna make it into the Songwriter Hall of Fame and all these, like it's just something that had happened, and that however long it took you to pen it out and write it, and then it just changed it. Just the amount of people affected by the one song, it's crazy.
It is, and I think that's why you can't set yourself a goal of. I mean, at least I can't. I'm going to write a hit, or I'm going to write a song that's really going to change people. And you have to start with yourself. You
Hmm.
just have to start with yourself and write something. I always say, if I can make myself cry while I'm sitting there on that bed playing my guitar, then I know I've got something, because your first member of your audience, I guess, is you, really. And then if you can affect yourself emotionally, you're probably going to have the same effect on other people.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. So I want to just move forward to the newest thing that you've just done, because I mean, obviously we spent a lot of time on how you built this amazing, incredible career, and you just did the show, which was live from the UK, and you had all female or orchestra, or like, tell me about the thought behind this performance, and then the record, and how it all kind of came together.
Well, I've been performing with my band has been basically the same over in the UK since 2015. My husband Barry Walsh plays piano and
Hmm.
accordion, and a bass player Connor McCraner, and guitar player Colin McLean. And so it's the four of us normally, and we had the opportunity to do a tour with them and an all female string quartet from Scotland, who I had played with at a festival in Scotland a couple of years before. And that was just a dream come true, because to play with strings, I mean, I've done it live a few times before this, and it's just like, I mean, it's like surfing. it's just like it's like there's this wave and you're just riding it, and
Hmm.
you're just kind of, it's not even under your control anymore. It's an incredible feeling, and so I really wanted to do it. And once we got the tour set up, we thought, we have to document this. We have to record it, and maybe we'll get lucky, and we'll have a live album. Maybe we won't, but this is our chance.
Hmm.
So we had a live crew coming out for 3 of the, I think, 9 tour dates that we did. In 3, it was a challenge because in 3 different rooms, 3 different venues that sounded very different, all sounded beautiful, but all in their own way, and they had to contend with 3 different sets of circumstances acoustically,
Right.
and 8 musicians. It's not an insignificant thing to record all that live. And we did it. We pulled it off. We managed to hit the tour when we were really kind of very comfortable and having kind of at a peak, and we weren't too tired. It wasn't at the end, but it
Hmm.
wasn't at the beginning where we were just working things out. So we got these recordings, and it was 2019, that tour, and we just had it in the can. I had another album that was coming out, so I thought, oh, I'm just going to put this away and I'll listen to it all at some point. And then the pandemic happened, and you know, somewhere around June of 2020, we thought, well, we're stuck at home, might as well mix this live album. Let's get it all out and listen to it. And we had, our engineer was in London, and we were here in the States, and we were just sending things back and forth. And the farther away we got from live performance, because everything was shut down, the more wonderful and kind of emotional this recording sounded to me, because we weren't able, just like I would be listening to a mix, and the sound of the room and the sound of the people and the audience and their response, because I was playing live streams during lockdown and everything, but
Hmm.
and the, you know, it was wonderful to be able to be in touch with people that way, but those little hearts on the screen,
Yeah. Don't.
it's not the same thing.
Right. You're
And
done
I'm
with the song. It's just silence and hearts.
Yeah, and I'm listening to these tracks that we recorded, and I'm hearing the audience and hearing their response and feeling their energy, and I just was it was very emotional.
Mhm.
And so that was kind of where we were at, like, mentally, while we were mixing the album. My husband Barry and I were mixing, and in a way, it's just the way things happened. It just seemed like, oh yeah, I think what we all need is a lot. People have all kinds of opinions about live albums. They love them, they hate them, whatever. But after 2.5 years of no live music, at least for us, we've only done a handful of gigs since 2020. This is such a perfect way for us to kind of come back.
Yeah, that's amazing. You have a handful of dates coming up though, right?
We've got a UK
Like
tour. Yeah,
UK tour.
we've got a UK. Well, actually, we've got 2 UK tours. One this year and one in May of 2023, and then some other dates sprinkled in. We're going into the Netherlands, and some other little things sprinkled in here and there. Yeah.
Are you doing the quartet? Or, I mean, are you doing the strings or just more? Because some of the show, I'm just going off your website. Some of them just say like an intimate evening, basically with you and your husband, right?
Yeah, we're doing the UK tour. Is my 25th anniversary of playing over there. I went over there very early in my career, and I found an audience, and it grew and it grew and it grew. Ended up being probably 10 times bigger than the audience I play for in the States, weirdly enough. But hey,
It
I'm
happens for bands.
I'm
I think it's so
so
cool. Who cares?
I'm
Yeah.
so grateful for them. They have really, gotten me through. Um, and so it happens that it's the 25th anniversary of my first tour there. So what we're doing is, some of the dates are my husband and I'm kind of throwing it back to how it was when I first went over there
Hmm.
25 years ago, and we're going to do some old songs and talk tell stories about early tours, all that sort of thing. And then we're doing some band dates as well.
That's
So
cool.
it'll be kind of a mix of everything.
That's exciting. I love those very intimate shows with the discussions and how this came together and early stories. I think that's such a
They're
cool
fun,
concept.
and you can sort of turn on a dime. I can play a song one night and then play a different song another night, and it's much easier to do that when there's just the two of you. And Barry and I have been playing together for 30 years, so no matter what I throw at him, he knows.
He's got it.
He catches. Yeah.
That's cool. Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Gretchen, for doing this. This has been a pleasure. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having me. It's been really fun.
My last question, as we talked about earlier, is if you have any advice for aspiring artists.
Yeah, it's more than what I said before. I think because I've picked up a few things on the way. I think there's such a big demand on artists now to wear all these different hats and be constantly coming up with content, which is a word that I really hate. But we all know what it is, but it's, they're told to engage all the time. And that, for a person whose temperament is that of an artist, that can be incredibly exhausting, and it can really deplete the energy that you need to create. And I know for myself, I've always needed sort of that downtime to just let things germinate in order to be able to write the next album or whatever. And so I would say, take care of yourself, be protective of your time and your attention, and don't, of course you have to do what you have to do in terms of social media and all that stuff, but don't let that be something that takes away from your sort of source of creativity, because that is the thing. Without that, you have nothing. Without that, you're just I don't know, an influencer. I don't know what you are, but remember that you're an artist, and remember that you need to protect that. I would say that's the most important thing, I think, right now. It's a hard time for singer-songwriters, especially those that are sort of in the independent world, that are, not, they're touring is hard right now. We haven't really completely come back. It's tough. So protect yourself and take care of yourself. Bringing it backwards.